people getting off their last sales call or deal reviews or forecast meetings or whatever it is to kick off here. Well, you're in the right room if you're looking for a conversation around how to build a culture around value-driven sales, and not just talk about frameworks, but talk about how do we actually translate this, the conversations our AEs, our CSMs, our team is having in the field, right? It's easy to talk about this stuff, really highfalutin. Hey, this is our, platform and value prop and all this stuff. It's very hard to get everyone rowing in the same direction across marketing, across product, across sales. And again, your frontline sellers and CSMs with those who matter most, your clients and prospects. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Really appreciate we have an all-star group of people here that have spent a lot of time, maybe too much time, thinking about how to do this and doing it themselves and making some mistakes and figuring it out. So really excited to learn from them firsthand today. Yeah, we're gonna kick off before we get into the details and the how. We're gonna just kind of define this because I think a lot of people define value selling in a bunch of different ways, and I think we're taking more of the kind of broader sense of what it means in terms of orienting not just sellers or jumping in on an opportunity and doing some ROI math around it, but like how do you build a culture, even from the top, from C-suite founder down, of really focusing on delivering value and outcomes for customers, and how do you not just keep at that elevated level and actually bring that down to conversations that every AE, CSM, marketing email that goes out, that you're really orienting yourself around that kind of like customer first way of running a business, really. So maybe we'll go in reverse order. Would love to hear how this group would define value selling, and maybe why you think it's I'll have a second part to that. Why do you think it's so topical right now? A lot of this stuff, has been around for a long time. I think we're seeing a resurgence of a lot of certain parts of, best practices in the go-to-market world. I think this is one core one that we've seen coming out of the ZERP era. So curious to get your take on, what does it mean and why is this the conversation that, we picked today and why people are so passionate about it in 2024? Stefan or Rug, do you want to kick us off?
Yep, happy to. So I'll start with the why. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, so I always like to start with the why. So the why is important here. The concept itself may seem trivial, which is value selling is all about putting customers first, putting their business objective first. Technology, end of the day, is meant to enable business outcomes. So it is taking that concept and making it real, as you said, in different parts of the organization. Why first is because of the increased pressure on revenue leaders. If you look at pipelines getting harder, deals are getting stored, renewals are at risk, it's because of the increased scrutiny on any kind of technology spend. Interesting statistics are around, let's say, the scrutiny that you'd expect on a deal above $1 million, you're seeing the same on even a 100K deal or even less. There has been
any money. Yeah.
Any money. Yes. All money is being scrutinized. So that puts even more emphasis, as you said, in the last few months on this approach. And this approach manifests itself in various ways. So defining it is important, as you said. It could be very much an outbound marketing campaign. Are you leading with your technology, or are you putting your customers first? It could be MDRs calling and the talk script that they have. How does that look like? It could be our reps qualifying deals with certain criteria which are more business oriented. Account planning comes to mind, right? And all the way through to closing the deal with your champions having the empowerment to make the right decisions using a business outcomes approach. Renewing deals, renewing accounts, growing accounts. It's basically an organizational transformation as I see it.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's harder than ever out there. So I don't know how many people would disagree with you in terms of getting folks to part with money. It's not as easy as it maybe was for a number of years. And then yes, taking this entire customer journey approach is I think how the best people see it, because it's very hard to pick and choose, and it's confusing with customers when you say one thing at one part of the cycle and a completely different part, maybe post sales or in your marketing message, that's different when you talk to someone. So That's a great point. And then yeah, Omer, what about yourself? Why do you think maybe adding on, even if we agree, maybe adding on
Yeah,
to that opinion, and then what does it mean to you?
yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely agree with Anurag. I'm really happy that he mentioned customer outcomes. That is the most important thing when we talk about business value, and I think that it's a focus right now to people because I think there is a misconception about business value in general. People think that business value is a business case. It's an ROI
Yes.
calculation, and it's not. It's not. It's a very small part of the entire value motion. Like Anurag said, the value motion needs to start from the very beginning, from lead generation all the way to post sales. And a small component of it might be an ROI case, but a bigger component of it is to understand the outcome, the needs of the customer, really do a much deeper discovery of what the customer actually wants to accomplish versus what they want from the product. So let me give you an example. Currently at Freshworks, I would say that the smaller customers, the way that we sell to them is like, hey, customer, what do you want? And then they said, oh, we want a ticketing system, or we want to see a chat bot. And then we come and show it to them. That's not value selling. That's feature selling. What we want to do is to ask the customer, what do you want to achieve? How do you want to run your customer service business? And really understand that, and then come with a good solution, with a good case, and continue forward. That's kind of my take on that.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, definitely not just numbers. And it's easier to do, I think, the not just numbers part. And I think we're overcomplicating it a lot of the time. But
Yeah,
Maggie,
and a
yeah,
lot of salespeople, by the way, think that this is value. This is value, and that's something that I'm really trying to change. There's a lot more to value selling than the ROI case.
amazing, amazing. Yeah, Maggie, to round us out.
I feel so viscerally connected to what Omer just said because I feel like there are so many instances when you start to shift to become more value centric, where sellers, CSMs, etc., like we need more use cases, we need more case studies, we need more stories, we need etc. And in reality, what they are, yes, they're asking for, and use cases are really important, but if you're not doing the right upfront discovery and asking those right questions, then it doesn't matter what the use case may say, because every situation needs to be in the customer's language. So I feel really strongly about what Omer just said, but I'm going to add a different spin to it. When I sold 5 years ago, when I was still in sales 5 years ago, on average, so pre-COVID, on average, a buying committee consisted of about 7 people. Yeah. And today, the new research, if you've read The Jolt Effect, one of the greatest new sales books that has come out, there are an average of 13 to 14 people that are associated with any given buying committee. And so I feel as though that's such an indicating factor of why value selling is coming up again. It's having this resurgence is we have significantly more people to sell to than we ever have. It continues to increase. As the buying committees become more diverse, we have to understand how value not only relates just to one specific person, but to a number of people. And this makes the sales process seemingly more complex if we're not coaching to emotional intelligence, good discovery, and really persisting that throughout the entire customer life cycle, not even just the sales life cycle, but customer life cycle. So I think that's why this is coming up so much post-COVID.
Yes, totally. And I think there's a mix of what you just mentioned in terms of there's like skills that the field and that people need to have, that empathy. And I feel like it's easier to do the like, again, we're defaulting to like value selling being the data. It's easier to do that, be analytical than it is to like deeply understand each unique customer's, way of thinking about it. But that's also just not as fun as getting to know people and problems and thinking about every unique, opportunity or use case as like its own consulting project. That's why I got into sales and started loving it, is because everything is unique, but there's like a framework of thinking about it. I think a lot of people just kind of default at that. But Anna, are you about to thoughts or ideas to jump in with?
No, I was just going to do a big plus one on Maggie's suggestion, right? Buying is becoming way more complex, and again, refocusing everybody in the buying cycle to the concept of, hey, this is important. What is important is if you look at the customer perspective, right? So if we can take the value craft and put it in such a way that, okay, if you're selling to 14 people, out of those 14 people, what is a common thread? What can be a
Yes.
normalizing factor between those 14 people? Could be something that helps get priority for your project versus 10 others that are in front of them. So if I found one of the ways to do that is, okay, let's agree on why this project is important, and we can take their end customer's perspective here. So if they're trying to improve their end customer experience, for example, Omar mentioned about Freshworks, right? The company which is looking at improving customer experiences. So that becomes a unifying ground between those 14 people we're trying to sell to and how our technology is enabling end of the day that outcome that they're all compensated on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
it's a
and I wanted
translation. Yeah.
one thing that I wanted to add on that, and selfishly just wanted to emphasize what you just said, Anurag, because what I am currently trying to do in that new motion, the innovation consulting motion that we're building here at Freshworks, is exactly that. So basically, when we come to a new customer, or even existing customer, we try to sell, maybe increase the contract with them, or sell a new contract, or sell basically new seats to them. We try to involve people from all around the organization in a design thinking workshop that takes, that spans across a couple of days with everybody in the same room, trying to solve, the process together, just because exactly what you just said. We need to sell to everybody. We need to find the common thread between all the different buyers and influencers in that deal.
Yeah, really good point. And I thought it would be helpful, and we can, continue to talk high level, but I think we have some really great examples with this group from companies that are either at or have been at. So maybe if we can just go through and kind of hear a soundbite of like, why the company took on this focus on value selling, the context there, and then the most important levers, and maybe stuff that you messed up that you would have done differently, I think is also really helpful. So hopefully people either avoid the mistake or realize they're making it and quickly pivot. So maybe I'll give this group a second to think about a good example, so we can get down to the details. But yeah, I think it's really hard to retrain product marketing sales again, to get out of like, we are obsessed with our own company and product and all this stuff, to be obsessed about the customers and have that empathy. And I'm even, sometimes find myself talking about Accord and the platform versus what you're trying to accomplish with it. That should be every sentence going into an EBR. It's not what did we accomplish together. It's, hey, you had this project. How did you move your project further? That was, the thing that got prioritized with the support of Accord, not what value are you getting out of Accord. It's how did it move that thing forward. It's such a hard thing to, I think, retrain everyone around. But maybe Maggie, if you want to kick us off, because I think, I don't know if you're thinking of the OneTrust example. I think it's a perfect example of orienting around value selling, first being a single product in this platform and really having to kind of like rethink everything from the top down.
Yeah, happily. And it's not even, I don't think that OneTrust is necessarily unique. I'll share the story because I've seen this at 3 organizations now sequentially, where, implementing a new methodology, we're talking about value selling today, but like any new methodology is really hard because it requires a full change of behavior and change management program that a lot of people don't want to wait to execute on effectively. So you decide to implement a methodology and everybody get on the same page, and you build out that methodology and you understand what new language you're going to speak. But a lot of people and methodology companies, any value selling methodology company will tell you this will be an immediate transition in the way that you speak. And there's this big, uptake, and then it kind of plateaus, and then some people drop, and then some people increase, whatever. The way that I've gone about this in the 3 times that I've implemented, and all have been different in their success, is that the buy-in from the very beginning, when we decide on a methodology, does not solely include the sales organization. Actually, more importantly, it's included product marketing and marketing leaders who are going to need to be able to adapt to that methodology, translate that methodology into new sales content. It includes product management. How do they think about building the right products, features, functionalities, and think about them in a different customer lens rather than just we got a Q&A about wanting to do XYZ within our product, but why does that matter? So it allows them to prioritize things more effectively. Customer success and post-sale, how do we deliver to actual outcomes that, and then drive adoption to actual outcomes? So it really does require you to get all of the go-to market and product organizations, marketing organizations included in the decision and the development of whatever language you are going to adopt. I'll say that I've had 2 experiences where this has gone really well, and one where it didn't go as well. And that's probably due to a lot of things. The first, though, being I don't think we did a good enough job at really coaching the product marketing and customer success teams to be successful in a new methodology and continuously reiterate that. So every time that new content came out, could we have a committee of people who could review and support and then reiterate what we really needed to change this language externally? And that happens a lot. I mean, people are really busy. Implementing a methodology is time consuming. And so I'd say that's probably some of the advice that I'd give and areas that I'd look out for. One of the big areas I'd look out for.
Just to round that out, anything specific to avoid that challenge that you then did in future rollouts to make sure that no one got left behind and that those are folks supported?
Yes. I am so maniacal about a really great operating rhythm or governance model that's associated to any one of these launches. And by that, I mean, before you kick off a methodology at all, it is so essential to understand how are you going to reinforce it through opportunity review calls with frontline managers? How are you going to enforce it through committee meetings of content review, and how frequently are those happening? How does the concept of your forecast call change? And how do we train RVPs, SVPs, managers, all the way cascading to have those conversations in this new messaging? And so it's so important for me, and I've done this wrong and I've done this right, to have a true methodology that the leadership team enforces, that we measure, and that people from outside teams like Omer, Anurag's, and mine will join to provide support for coaching for those functions.
Amazing. Well, let's pin the measurement piece, and that's something that Anurag brought up before. So maybe shifting gears to Anurag to go through kind of a similar story and any things that went wrong, and maybe some tips on how to prevent that. And I'd love to highlight the measurement aspect, because I think a lot of the time it can feel, a project like this can feel very kind of like in the clouds, like, oh, we're going to implement this new methodology. It's across all these organizations. How are we going to measure the impact? So I'm curious to get your take on that to round it out.
For sure. So addition to what Maggie said, right, the top-down support is essential even from a measurement lens. And what I found interestingly at Red Hat was, given our legacy with open source and this great technology which is loved by the community, and Gartner actually just published a case study about how we have gone from there to now a fully enterprise value approach, where the transition happened because of the need of our portfolio evolving to serving a bigger business outcome, and the fact that we had to sell that outcome to different parts of buyer organizations, not just IT. So that required this shift to a bigger investment with this change of going to market. So when I was hired for this role, I tested a lot for what's the appetite for this change. As Maggie said, it's not just a sales change. So over time, we were able to get executive buy-in from not just sales leaders, marketing, product, customer success. Everybody's now all in, because that's when the magic happens. And it's not just a top-down support. You got to then prove that it works. So it's,
Mm,
you know, prove it in the trenches, then you do a little bit more. Prove it again, then you expand your scope. So that's something that we've been trying to do. And I'm going to bring it back to measurement, because that's essential, right, to the success of these new changes. So at Red Hat, when we started, our focus was, yes, there's a bigger vision for us, but to get to that vision, it's a multi-year journey. And we thought, okay, we should start first with something that's going to give us quick wins, the at-bats, right? So we focused on sales as our first target. And within sales, we said, okay, let's look at a few of the big wins that people will be talking about the most. And let's try and show them there is an additive, incremental aspect of taking this new approach. People were not familiar with it. There were a few who had experienced it from other organizations, but a lot were like, what are you talking about? The product is great. It's going to sell for itself. So to change that required proving it in the trenches, and then showing that here there is a measurable impact. There's a lift, a growth in let's say, the deal size. That's typically a measure that's used to prove success. Is if when you have a value approach, deal size goes up, win rates go up as well. So Maggie mentioned deal reviews. So the business value team at Red Hat is very active on deal reviews, because of the fact we bring the customer perspective into that deal review. It helps with the follow through, as she said. It helps with reinforcing the right behaviors. And we have seen more than a 20% increase in conversion rates on the deals on which business value has been partnering for those deal reviews. So that solidifies the pipeline for us significantly. When pipeline is scarce, you want to preserve the pipeline that has been built. So we've had a lot of success this year with those kind of initiatives, additional to the core of our work.
Yeah, that's interesting and sounds very counterintuitive, right? I think it's either we're going to start small, it's going to be a groundswell, it's going to start with maybe the reps and blah blah blah, and then we'll convince leadership, or leadership does it and it's all tops down. It doesn't feel very much like it reflects the reality of what people's work is like today. I think what you're saying, to properly do change management, it needs to be sponsored at the top, but it needs to build and grow, and building a muscle. And I think it's something I've seen from even adding new organizations. Some companies start with a very strong sales team and don't have marketing. It's very hard for the marketing team to get traction, because maybe you hire a super senior marketing leader and they have no support with everyone else, or the opposite, you start small and you don't have the leadership. And so it's that both commitment from up top, but knowing how to build momentum over time with real wins, which can be tough to sign up for in business, because there's always something on fire that you can solve for today. So it's a really great call out. Omar, if you want to round us out, I don't know which company or example you want to start with.
I'm gonna talk about Gong a little bit, because at Gong I built the value practice from the very beginning. So I was the first value engineer and grew the team. And to your point, it really needs to start with a vision of a leader. So our CRO back then thought it would be a good idea to have someone who would do value selling, value engineering. And but at the end of the day, the groundwork that I did in making sure, like Anwar said, to add value in every deal that we were engaged in, and engage with individual sales reps, identify those reps that are the best, that are the most strategic ones, so they can then talk about the great work that you do and vouch for the an increase in headcount or more investment in your team. So that is something that absolutely is essential when you build a new value program, because at the end of the day, people in the field need to understand what's in it for them. If they have so much they need to deal with, from contracting systems to quoting systems to value systems to all sorts of things that they need to remember during the sales process. So another thing is just going to confuse them. They really need to we need to make sure they understand the value, and then they'll engage with you and will support your growth.
Yeah. I think a lot of time starting with those, something that we use at Accord to drive reinforcement of this more mature value selling type motion is, how do we start with the folks that are leading from the front, with the best folks that are basically intuitively doing a lot of this stuff, and then you give it a name, and then you have them championing it in front of the team. Always feels a lot more organic to those peers, and then maybe you get the top 10% that are doing it. Maybe then you get 20% more. So then now you get the 30%. Then how do you get the 50%, and then so on and so forth? I find that nothing quite hits like a peer pitching something that worked, and the frontline folks that are doing an incredible job that everyone kind of aspires to be, than even the CRO or CEO. It's like sometimes it resonates even more.
It always does, yeah. And I wanted to add one more point about measurement. So I agree with everything my esteemed colleague peers here said about win rates and deal sizes and deal velocity, that all of that, if you build a value motion, if you launch a new methodology, you have to measure. But there are other things as well that you can measure in even before that. So these are all lagging indicators for deal success and sales success. But what about things like are deals that value is involved in, or have that new methodologies? Do they have a higher power? Do they have more multi-threading? Are you able to reach out and have more conversations, higher email responsiveness? All of those things are leading indicators that some, in systems these days can measure. So have a dashboard for it. Try to measure it even before you get to the end of the deal.
I could not agree more with that one. Like that, I was just thinking that, Omar, too. It's even things like mutual action plans. Like if you're sending a mutual action plan, how are you driving accountability of a true mutual action plan? And if the deal is truly valuable to the customer that you are selling to, there is a deeper accountability of the actions within that plan. And we can track that on a very consistent basis, which hopefully impacts activity, event, tracking, and hygiene in Salesforce or whatever CRM tool you use.
Yep.
Totally. Yeah, I think the leading indicators, that's something actually maybe we double click on, because I think sometimes when you pick too big of a metric, it can be like, does this thing really do that, from folks that are far away from it, right? Like, say the CFO, are we going to continue to invest in either headcount or programs or enforcement around, this new methodology or process or value system, whatever it is? Sometimes when you pick something that's so big, it's like, well, was it tied to this other thing that we did and we launched this new product, and would that have happened organically and this new leader came in that, was very strong? Or because you're probably doing multiple things at once. And I always struggle with that as a seller. I don't want to over promise ever. I think it's one of the worst things you can do for trust with the customers, over promising, or any of your stakeholders internally. So what are the things that you would look at maybe as some of those leading indicators, like Omar mentioned, in terms of more stakeholders involved in the deal, like Maggie mentioned, in terms of the way you're selling with a more proactive approach, like a mutual plan or using a business case? Would love to hear from this group, like, what are the behaviors and activities you can focus on? Kind of like on the top of my head, the score takes care of itself type approach of like, what are the inputs that we all would agree intuitively, where we don't need the numbers and ROI, where maybe a group of executives like a CFO that's further from this stuff would just like nod along and be like, yeah, I get how doing this thing would lead to that if I saw these inputs or impacts. So we talked about one, which is like higher in the organization and more stakeholders. What are some others that you can support? You can use as supporting artifacts to the impact that you're providing at your company. Omar, if you want to kick things off again.
I'll actually let Anurag and Maggie.
Okay.
I said I gave my 3 cents, 2 cents.
I'm glad you brought it up, Omar, because as you said, the lagging indicators, right? They can take time, especially if you're starting new. So you want to show some early success, which a deal may take 6 months, 9 months to actually close. So some of the other leading indicators are account planning could be one. If you're seeing the quality of account planning actually become more customer oriented, because that's where all opportunities start. That could be an indicator that, okay, account planning is no longer just a check the box. It's actually more customer oriented. We are seeing pipeline attached to real business outcomes. And then when those deals start to get reviewed in forecasts and in any kind of, if you have MedPick, any opportunity review cadence, if you are actually seeing the quality of those responses is now more customer oriented. It's not
It's a great artifact to use. Yeah, looking at
yeah,
next step, looking at the
at next
inputs.
step, right? Looking at
Do we have
those
numbers? Yeah.
give you a direction that okay, the field is getting it. They're now thinking it's a mind shift. They're now
Yes.
thinking about
That's what I
customer.
mean. It's hard to quantify a mind shift. So how do you
That's
think
right.
about ways to translate that investment to the team?
It could be so if a deal is taking 6 months, 9 months, right? Deal acceleration is, let's say, stage progression is something that we have measured in the past. We have seen success on stage progression because you don't have to wait for the last stage. If you're able to see that, okay, a deal without this approach would have taken, let's say, X number of days, now you're able to cut that short by half of the time. That is a good leading indicator that, okay, things are working. If you're able to get stakeholder access, I was just in New York a couple of weeks back, and the account team got me to meet with a very different set of C-level executives at a bank that we've not had access to in the past. So the fact that we were able to bring a business conversation meant that we were able to speak to business executives. End of the day, they have the budgets for the project that IT is trying to champion. So we're making life easier for our IT champions, for our people who are feeling the pain, but they're not
Yeah.
able to speak to the business users, business owners, because they don't have that ammunition. So the fact that a value approach makes it easier, again, going back to the buying process, we're helping our buyers navigate internal politics as well and get to the people who are owning the budget, right? So that would not have happened if we had not taken a value approach. So we are short-circuiting a lot of those buying process steps, which again goes back to deal velocity as something that can be measured. It's a leading indicator.
Yeah.
I really love having objective metrics, obviously, like the ones that we're talking about here. And I think many people, I'm sure the four of us as panelists, but also a lot of people that are listening in on this call have been in that situation where it's like, I literally had this 2 weeks ago. I'm evaluating an opportunity. It's forecasted for Q3. Our Q3 ends in the end of October. It's a pretty freaking large deal for this rep. And he has completely gone through his stage advancement criteria, just as would be expected. His med pick is filled out, his value selling fields are filled out. He's got everything looks right in the CRM. And you start to pressure test the opportunity subjectively again, I go back to the governance model, like the op review. And all of a sudden, I'm calling out things like, you haven't talked to this person in actually 3 weeks. They haven't gotten back to you on XYZ that they were supposed to get back to you. There seems to be a high risk situation with this customer in the news that I'd imagine is going to end up taking precedence that just happened within the last 3 weeks. And lo and behold, 3 hours later, this rep has a call with their champion, who of course is not an actual champion, as we realize in the subjective opportunity review. And they say, oh yeah, this thing is stalled and it's not actually that great. And this op is in, selection stage, about to go into, final closing. And so I do want to say that I can't understate the value of things for value selling, for things like subjective measurements of success, which are why the management chain is so essential to get right when you implement this. So things that I look out for that are more subjective are things like, I want to understand and evaluate what types of questions managers are asking. And I want to rate those questions as green, yellow, and red as an enablement practitioner. And like, do they actually know what they're coaching to? Things like, I want to be like seeing in team chats that people are actually collaborating with one another and using language that's indicative of their understanding and working together to drive towards deals, rather than what I found prior to implementing a value methodology is a lot of people doing a whole lot of things, piecemealed them all together, versus when you implement a structure like this and an operating rhythm that supports it, you get a whole lot more collaboration and thought that comes together as a team. So I also look out for things like that more subjectively, that are harder to measure, but really impactful.
I want to do a big plus one actually on something that Maggie hit on. In this change effort, yes, top down, you need sales leadership support. Frontline sales managers is often overlooked. That is so big,
110%.
so huge in this transformation. So when at Red Hat, we have a really strong partnership with our revenue enablement team when we have driven this change. And every time we think about any kind of skills enhancement for our sellers, the immediate next question is, what are we doing for their managers? Because that is where the
Yes.
reinforcement happens on a daily basis.
Yeah, this is something that, yeah, I missed a lot even at Accord when we're rolling out, how do we enforce business case building? How do we enforce mutual action plan usage? How do we enforce account planning? And, the artifacts of this, we, thought we did a great job in leadership, who we sold CRO, thought we did a great job with the rep training, but we didn't give tools to frontline managers. And it's not that they didn't want to be a part of it. It's like, they're the busiest people though. Like, I think it's the hardest job. You go from being a top seller typically to now having way too many deals, you're overloaded. Where do you support? Blah, blah, blah. You need to be able to, how do you support those frontline managers? Not just train them in the same way, give them tools, give them more time. That's really, really great call out as we wrap up. Yeah, Omer.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that. And talent in general is something that we need to, I think in the new way of selling, value selling, outcome selling is something that we need to think about when we hire salespeople. So one of the things that I had a lot of clashes with our sales leadership is like, why don't you, head of value engineering, teach our reps how to go through a business case or how to build a business case? It seems pretty easy to us. And I'm like, the answer to this is, we just, for example, spent 3 days in a sales offsite explaining to people how to walk through 2 slides in a presentation. Could you imagine taking a whole degree in finance and data and whatever and teach it to people? But on the other hand, why can't we hire people that are proficient in walking through business cases? Why can't that be part of the hiring criteria when we hire new people into the Salesforce?
Yeah, I think people underestimate how big of a transformation is, and it starts with the people. And I think a lot of people have realized, and teams have realized in 2024, that folks that could have been successful before are different than who they need now. And you've seen a lot of like change of guards, starting at the very top. I mean, the most CEOs and co-founders and everything have switched in the last couple of years. The most CROs, like all of this stuff at the very top, all the way down. Like, what's needed to win, and not just to talk the talk, but what to walk the walk. And it's very hard to find people that are going to hold their teams and themselves accountable to this. Cool. Well, we got like a minute and a half left. Any final questions from folks dialing in, or final words of advice or wisdom or mistakes that they made? Again, I think, hammering in on the last piece, I think you can't miss, and what we've talked about, you can't miss any of them. Like the hard part of this is you need all the different orgs, you need folks at top, you need the top, folks on the field to get this right. And it's very hard, but it just pays off dividends. That's why we're talking about it. It's like a cheat code. It's like the silver bullet for honestly, making work more fun. Like your colleagues all speaking the same language and running really fast is speaking the same language, is orienting around something like this, which is why we're talking about it and why it's worth the investment. But any final thoughts from this crew here?
Yeah, Ross, if I could just add one final thing, because whether you're on this call and you've done this before, or you're thinking about implementing a new methodology or trying to reinforce it after it's maybe gone poorly, give yourself the grace of time and set the right expectations of how long it takes to actually change an organization. I mean, between Anurag, myself, and Omer, we have many people within our companies. And so transitioning either from, 2,000 people to think, speak, act, and then just completely execute differently, to having 100,000 people do that. Give yourself time, set the right expectations with leadership, in every situation that I've ever gone through, whether it's been 200 people or 2,500 people to 10,000 people, this has taken at least like 18 to 24 months to show true deliverable results.
Yeah, expectation setting is very, very important. Yeah, Anurag.
No, just expectation setting wise also the immediate, we started with this right at the top of the hour. Value does not equal an ROI tool. That is by default something that may come to you whenever you hear about value selling. Oh, here's an ROI calculator. We'll send it over the wall to our customers, and that's it. That is probably one of the worst ways to adopt it. Yes, it may become part of your overall approach at some point. Some version of a business case, some version of an ROI calculator is part of it, but that is not the be all end all. There is so much more value that value has to offer. So be open to it, yet have the grace, as Maggie said, it'll take time.
Yeah, great.
And
great
I
tip
would
there.
just
Yeah.
say hire value engineers to be your salespeople, hire value engineers to be your customer success people, and then you won't need a value engineering function, but you'll have a very, very successful business.
Totally. Amazing. Well, this was super fun. A lot of things, yeah, I reflected on from the mistakes that I made in the past, trying to do this at a quarter with our customers. So hopefully other folks out there listening either live or on the recording have some, things to think about working on this with their company, whether it's something that's deployed or you're reinforcing now or just getting started on. I think the juice is worth the squeeze with a project like this. So yeah, thank you so much, Maggie, Omer, Anurag, for taking the time out of your busy days to share some learnings. And yeah, very excited to hear the feedback from folks that dialed in and checking out later.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.